So I bought two glues to try out on my new Bixler fuselage. One was Elmers ProBond Advanced. The other is Goop Multi-Purpose. So I've connected the push rod to the servo. I've scoured the side of the servo. I'm going to take the Elmers ProBond. You see it doesn't foam up like Gorilla Glue, and you can spread it around. So now that I've glued this servo in place, I'll take a piece of foam and this clamp and clamp the servo in until this glue dries. So it's been 24 hours since I glued these, and this glue does not work on plastic. It's a simple push and this is already loose. But at least this glue cleans up with rubbing alcohol. So this is my old fuselage. It's the one that's all beat up and glued back together. I cut each side of my motor mount here and popped my motor mount out. And then I glued these back just to test the ProBond and the Goop. This side is the ProBond and this side is the Goop. And we'll see how each works. Okay, well, this has been over 24 hours and ProBond just snapped off. Goop is actually pulling the foam. Here's the glue line and it's pulling the foam from around the foam, so the glue line isn't breaking. And you can see it actually pulled the adjacent foam cells off and the Goop did not separate. I will choose Goop All Purpose to glue my fuselage together because it seems to work really well on this foam. I've got my servo cleaned up from the Elmers glue and I'm going to apply the Goop All Purpose. It says to apply to each surface that you're going to be gluing. So a little dab there, and a little dab here. Spread it around. It says to let sit for 2 minutes and then bring the two surfaces together. So I'll hook my control rod up to the servo and put the servo in there and clamp it. So it's been about 24 hours since I glued this and clamped it, and you can see I'm banging on this servo horn and this is not coming off. So Goop All Purpose is great for plastic to foam, unlike the Elmers ProBond Advanced, which just snapped off with very little pressure pushing on the servo horn. Now I'm going to glue these two pieces of the fuselage together with the Goop All Purpose. Before I glue these two halves together, I'm going to take some 150 grit sandpaper and rough this really smooth foam up so there's a good bond between the two halves. Don't have to sand a lot, just enough to take the shininess off the foam. And while the two pieces are apart, I'll do this little area that the tail sits in. And I'll even rough this area up where the motor mount will be glued. Then I'll go over the places that are going to be glued with a microfiber cloth and some rubbing alcohol, just to get any oil or any dust off. Now I'm done sanding and cleaning the edges of the fuselage. I'm going to apply a nice light coat of Goop on both sides. Let it sit for a few minutes and then tape them together. I'll take my finger and spread this out. I'll put some Goop on my motor mount. Put some Goop in here where the motor mount will sit. And I'll do the other half of the fuselage. Apply the Goop. I'll put some more in the motor mount area and let that set for about 2 minutes. I will put my motor mount in here and place the two halves together. I take blue painter's tape and wrap it around the fuselage in several places very tightly. But when you put the tape on, Place it on one side, squeeze it together, and then pull the tape tight. Wrap around the other side. Do the same thing on the bottom. Squeeze it, pull the tape tight. You can see how easy these decals come off. I usually just take these decals off because they're pretty much useless. See, just this, even this low-tack painter's tape takes the decals off the fuselage. So, recommendation to Hobby King, don't put decals on there. Or these cheap, flimsy cellophane decals. If you want decals, give us the nice sticky kind. These kind are really, really cheap. Check any places where the foam might be separated, like right here. And squeeze it together and tape it. And go down it and give it a good squeeze. Get off any goop boogers here. That's an official term, goop boogers. So I put some rubber bands on the fuselage as well as the tape to hold everything together. The instruction says it takes about 24 hours to dry, and depending upon the material, it could take upwards of 48 to 72 hours for this to completely dry and maximum strength. So hands down, Goop wins this this test of gluing the Bixler 2 fuselage.